I am standing at the far edge of my grandfather's living room, while the photographer tells us to smile like we belong to one another. My father, Richard Whitaker, had already moved me to the last row, half hidden behind a potted fern, and my cousin Sabrina Cole was standing in the center like the day had been built around her. 10 minutes later, my family would tell everyone in that house that I had stolen my grandmother's emerald bracelet. I walked away from my home, my savings, and the last thin thread I still had to the people who raised me. If this story touched you, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it today. I never needed their approval to become who I was meant to be. The portrait was supposed to be for my grandparents' 50th anniversary. My grandmother June had spent the whole week polishing silver bowls and ironing linen napkins like royalty was coming, even though it was just us, a catered lunch, and a photographer from town named Harold Kessler, who had been taking church directories and graduation pictures in Laurel Creek for as long as I could remember. The afternoon was hot, in the heavy, breathless way August can be in Ohio. The windows were cracked, but the air still sat inside the room like warm water. My mother, Ellen Whitaker, kept dabbing her forehead with a folded tissue. My younger brother, Owen, complained about his collar. Sabrina, who was Aunt Denise's daughter, wore a cream-colored glove on her right hand and said she had burned herself with a curling iron that morning. She laughed when she said it, like everything embarrassing could be turned into charm if she said it softly enough. That was Sabrina's gift. Mine was being quiet. My name is Nora Whitaker, and by the time that picture was taken, I was 29 years old and already old enough to know exactly how my family worked. My father admired polish. He admired certainty. He admired people who made him look like he had built a perfect family with perfect children around a perfect table. Sabrina was not even his daughter, but he looked at her with more warmth than he had looked at me in years. She knew how to nod at his stories, laugh at the right places, and praise him for things no one else noticed. I knew how to pay my own bills, show up on time, and keep my thoughts to myself. In our family, that counted for very little. I had learned early that silence can sound a lot like love when you are the child still waiting for both. A week before the anniversary, my car transmission had started slipping. I had mentioned it at my parents' kitchen table because I was scared. I was working part-time at a print shop then, picking up extra hours wherever I could, and I did not have the money for a repair that serious. My father did not offer help. He only asked how long I expected to keep drifting before I found something respectable. Sabrina was there that night too, leaning against the counter, her nails wrapped around a glass of iced tea. She said nothing, but I caught the look she gave him. Pity, polished so carefully it almost passed for concern. That day at the anniversary, the old family stories moved from room to room with the trays of food. The men stood near the back porch discussing weather and property taxes. My mother and aunt compared church flowers. Sabrina floated. She carried glasses to the table. She adjusted my grandmother's shawl. She slipped into every photograph before anyone else had fully arranged themselves. When the photographer asked for one last large portrait in the living room, Sabrina took the center without being told. I remember June's bracelet because I had unclasped it for her an hour earlier when the latch caught her skin. It was an old gold piece with 3 square emeralds and tiny scratches on the underside from years of wear. She had asked me to set it on the vanity in the guest room while she changed blouses because the clasp pinched when the weather turned hot. So I did. Then the photographer called us in. Chairs scraped the wood floor. Somebody closed the piano lid. My grandfather Bill straightened his tie. Harold Kessler adjusted the lamp and told us not to blink. Sabrina lifted her gloved hand to smooth the sleeve at her wrist. I remember that because the glove looked ridiculous in August, and because she smiled as if discomfort never touched her. We took the first portrait, then another, then a few smaller groupings. My father insisted on one with just the real Whitakers, which meant me, Owen, Mom, and him around my grandparents. Sabrina laughed and said, "I know when I'm being kicked out," and my father answered, "You're family enough." It was a small sentence. It landed like a stone. After the last flash, everyone broke toward the dining room. I stayed back to help June sit down. She touched my arm and thanked me in that distracted, loving way grandparents sometimes do when they assume there will be more time later. Then she reached for her wrist and froze. "My bracelet," she said. At first, no one panicked. My mother said it was probably still upstairs. Aunt Denise said Sabrina had seen it earlier. My father asked me if I had left it on the vanity. I said yes. We searched the guest room, the bathroom, the hallway rug, the dining room table, under napkins, under chair cushions, inside the laundry room, in June's overnight bag, even in the freezer, because my grandfather once misplaced his hearing aid there, and for years no one let him forget it. Then the temperature in the house changed. Sabrina said, very softly, "I thought I saw Nora coming down from the guest room after everyone else had gone in." Every head in the room turned toward me. I still remember the rattle of ice in someone's glass. "I put it on the vanity because Grandma asked me to," I said. "That's all." My father's face hardened with the kind of certainty he usually saved for other people's mistakes. "You mentioned needing money last week." I stared at him because for a second I honestly did not understand what he was doing. June looked confused more than angry. My mother lowered her eyes. Owen stepped back, like distance could keep him clean. "I didn't take it," I said. No one raised a voice. That was the worst part. It all happened in that clipped clipped, careful family tone people use when they want cruelty to sound reasonable. Sabrina pressed her gloved hand to her chest and said she hated even bringing it up, but it was important to be honest. My father said honesty was exactly what was needed. Aunt Denise said we should check purses and jackets so no one felt singled out, though everyone in the room already knew who had been singled out. My grandfather said maybe the bracelet had simply been misplaced, but even he sounded tired. Then my father asked me to empty my bag on the dining room table. I did it because humiliation can make you obedient. A wallet, a folded receipt, lip balm, a cracked compact, 2 pens, the print shop schedule I had shoved inside that morning, nothing else. My father did not apologize. He just looked at the mess and said, "Then where is it, Nora?" I had never felt smaller. Not when I was 12 and forgot my line in the Christmas pageant. Not when I got laid off from the dental office and had to move back into my parents' house for 6 months. Not even when I heard my father tell Owen that I was too sensitive for the real world. Nothing matched that dining room, those faces, the silence after I had proven nothing because no one there had ever needed proof. I looked at my mother once. She was twisting her wedding band, eyes fixed on the tablecloth. That was the moment something in me went still. I said I was leaving. My father told me not to be dramatic. Sabrina said she was sure no one meant to upset me. My grandfather asked me to wait until after lunch, but I could already feel the truth settling into place. Even if the bracelet appeared an hour later tucked into a shoe or wedged behind a dresser, what had just happened would remain. They had all been willing. That was enough. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. By the time I reached the front hall, my father had followed me. Rain had started without warning, slapping against the porch roof in hot silver sheets. He stood between me and the door and told me I was embarrassing everyone. I asked him if he truly believed I had stolen from my grandmother. He did not answer directly. He said, "You've been under pressure. People do foolish things when they're desperate." I had one suitcase in my old room because I had been staying there off and on while trying to catch up on bills. I packed in 5 minutes. Jeans, 2 sweaters, work shoes, a framed picture of me and June at a county fair, the blue mug my mother once bought me at a church sale when I was 17. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear in a way it had never been before. My mother stood in the hallway while I zipped the suitcase. "Maybe come back tomorrow," she whispered, "after everyone calms down." I looked at her and understood that passivity can wound as deeply as blame. "I won't be back tomorrow," I said. I drove to Cincinnati that same evening with a slipping transmission and $217 in my checking account. The rain followed me down the highway. My windshield wipers clicked back and forth like an old clock refusing to stop. I rented a room for 3 nights above a bakery that smelled like sugar at dawn and grease by noon. After that, I found a studio apartment on the 3rd floor of a narrow brick building near a bus line. The walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor cough, argue on the phone, and once cry through an entire sitcom laugh track. Loneliness has a sound. It is the refrigerator turning on in an empty room. The first few months were ugly in small, unremarkable ways. I applied for office jobs, front desk jobs, filing jobs, bookstore jobs, a receptionist position at a veterinary clinic, and a records assistant position at a high school. I was turned down often enough that I stopped checking my email immediately and began waiting until I had already made coffee, as if disappointment might hurt less after caffeine. I found steady work at a neighborhood print and copy shop run by a patient woman named Teresa Vaughn. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and never asked why I flinched whenever a customer spoke sharply. She taught me how to clean scanner rollers, repair a paper jam without tearing the feed tray, and match old photographs to archival paper for people who wanted memorial displays or retirement boards. The work was modest, exact, and honest. I liked that. At night, I ate canned tomato soup with saltines at a card table I found near the dumpster behind my building. I paid $840 in rent and guarded every single one. I wrapped overdue notices in a rubber band and promised myself I would open them only on Sundays. There were weeks when I thought about calling home, not because I missed the house, but because I wanted someone to tell me I had not imagined what happened there. No one called me first. Months passed. October cooled the sidewalks. Then winter pinned dirty snow along the curbs. I learned the bus schedule by heart. I learned how to stretch a gallon of milk, how to smile at customers even after a sleepless night, how to keep my coat on indoors until the radiator groaned awake. I also learned that I was calmer in hardship than I had ever been in that house. Some families only love the version of you they can control. The first sign that life might open came from an elderly man who brought Teresa 3 damaged church registries after a pipe burst in his basement. Teresa let me stay late to flatten and scan the pages. I worked slowly, wearing cotton gloves and coaxing curled paper into place under low heat. When the man returned, he asked who had handled the restoration. Teresa pointed at me. 2 weeks later, he recommended me to a funeral home that needed old photo boards digitized for memorial services. It was not glamorous. It paid on time. I began taking weekend jobs on the side, scanning boxes of photographs for families who were afraid of losing history to water, mildew, or neglect. I bought a second-hand laptop, then a better flatbed scanner, then a used desk for a tiny office I rented at the back of a tax preparer's suite on Vine Street. The carpet smelled like dust and toner. The blinds never hung straight. I loved it. That was when I started sleeping through the night again. What I learned the following week changed everything. A large envelope arrived at the office one gray Tuesday in early March, thick and stiff with cardboard backing. The return address was Kessler Portrait Studio, Laurel Creek, Ohio. For a moment, I thought I had the wrong envelope. Then I opened it. Inside was a letter written in careful block print. Ms. Whitaker, my name is Martin Kessler. My father, Harold, photographed your grandparents' anniversary some years ago. He passed last fall, and I have been organizing the studio archive before we close the business. While scanning older negatives from that sitting, I noticed something I believe you should see. There were contact sheets in the envelope, not the polished print my family later hung in the hallway, but the raw sequence from before and after it. Frame after frame of us shifting, turning, waiting for direction, speaking between flashes. In one image, June was still laughing at something my grandfather had said. In another, Owen was scratching his neck. In another, my father was looking off camera. And in two frames, Sabrina was half turned away from the group, her gloved hand at her wrist, slipping my grandmother's emerald bracelet into the folded cuff hidden beneath the cream leather. I sat so still, my chair creaked under me. The emeralds caught the flash. There was no mistaking them. In the next frame, her purse sat open on the chair beside her. In the frame after that, the glove was smooth again, her smile already back in place. Martin's letter continued. He wrote that the studio normally delivered only selected proofs and a final retouched portrait, and his father had likely never looked closely at the outtakes. He only found them because he was digitizing every strip before shutting the place down. He had remembered the tension in that room. He had remembered me leaving early, alone in the rain. He said he did not know what had happened afterward, but he suspected those negatives might matter. I read the letter 3 times. Then I shut my office door and cried more quietly than I thought it was possible to cry. The truth doesn't always arrive when you want it. It arrives when it's ready. I called Martin that evening. His voice was thin and elderly, but steady. He told me he had enlarged the frames himself to be certain before writing. He said he was sorry for the years between then and now, as if time were something he had misplaced on purpose. I thanked him until the words sounded too small to hold what I meant. A few days later, he sent high-resolution files and a short affidavit stating when the negatives had been taken, where they were stored, and how he had found them. I never asked him to do that. He just did it because some people still understand that being believed can be a form of rescue. I thought the worst of it was over. I was wrong. The voicemail came from my mother. She had not spoken to me in nearly 4 years. "Nora," she said, too carefully, "your grandfather passed on Sunday. The estate attorney wants everyone present next week because the house title and some family distributions need signatures. Please come if you can." No apology, no mention of the bracelet, no acknowledgement of all the birthdays, Thanksgivings, and ordinary Tuesdays that had passed without a word. Just logistics, spoken into the quiet, as though silence had never been used like a weapon. I sat at my desk and looked at the waveform of her message on my phone screen. Outside, a delivery truck was backing into the alley behind the building. The beeping rose and fell like a warning. My grandfather had been the only one who ever called me after I left. Not often. Sometimes once every few months, always when no one else was around. He would ask about work, the weather, whether I was eating enough, whether the apartment was warm. He never brought up the accusation directly, and I had resented him for that. But now I understood. Age and dependence can quiet even decent people. The last time we spoke, his breathing sounded shallow. He told me, "You always did have steadier hands than the rest of us." I had not known it would be goodbye. I wasn't there to fight. I wasn't there to argue. I was there for one reason only. I drove back to Laurel Creek on a cool morning the following Thursday. The fields along the highway were bare and silvered with leftover frost. I parked outside the attorney's office, an old brick building near the courthouse square, and kept both hands on the steering wheel for a long minute before getting out. My father looked older than I expected. That surprised me more than it should have. His shoulders had rounded. His hair, once dark and exact, had gone almost completely white at the temples. My mother wore the same careful expression she had worn in every family photograph for years, as though any stronger feeling might crack the picture. Owen nodded at me but did not stand. Sabrina was already there in a pale coat, polished as ever, only thinner around the mouth. The attorney introduced himself as Paul Henley and began explaining deeds, accounts, the sale of the house, and the division of a few sentimental items. I barely heard him. I was watching Sabrina avoid my eyes. Then Paul mentioned that my grandfather had left a handwritten note requesting the old anniversary portrait be offered to me if I wanted it, because, as he wrote, "Nora is the only one who ever understood how to keep things that matter." My throat tightened so suddenly I had to look away. Sabrina gave a small, dismissive laugh and said, "That old picture always made me look strange anyway." I opened my bag. Inside were Martin's letter, the affidavit, and a tablet loaded with the enlarged frames. I had not planned a speech. I had spent too many years imagining speeches, and none of them mattered now. I only wanted my name back in the room where it had been taken from me. "There's something you all need to see before we go any further," I said. My father started to interrupt. I lifted the tablet and he stopped. I showed the first image, then the second, then the enlargement. No one spoke. Even silence has levels, and that one was deep enough to feel in my bones. The glove, once elegant from across the room, looked clumsy and desperate enlarged on the screen. The bracelet was there in full clear color, half tucked into the cuff. In the next frame, Sabrina's purse was open. In the one after that, her smile had returned. Paul Henley adjusted his glasses and asked where the images came from. I handed him Martin's letter and affidavit. He read both slowly. My mother pressed her fingertips to her mouth. Owen stared at the table. My father kept looking from the screen to Sabrina, as if certainty had finally become expensive. Sabrina tried first with confusion, then with anger, then with tears. The truth has a way of stripping a person down to whichever excuse they reach for fastest. She said she had panicked that day. She said she only meant to hide the bracelet for a little while, because she was behind on debt and had been planning to ask June for money, but could not bear the shame of it. She said when people started searching, she got scared. She said when my father looked at me the way he did, she let the moment keep moving because stopping it would have exposed her. So you let them think it was me, I said. She did not answer. My father finally found his voice. You watched her leave. Sabrina looked at him then, really looked at him, and I saw something pass across her face that had probably lived there for years. The knowledge that she had been protected so long, she mistook protection for innocence. My mother began to cry quietly. Owen muttered, "Jesus," under his breath, and put both hands over his face. I had imagined that moment so many times over the years that when it finally came, I expected triumph. What I felt instead was a strange, level sadness. So much had been built on one ugly choice, and an even uglier willingness to believe it. Have you ever known the exact moment people decided who you were, and how long they kept loving that lie because it was easier than apologizing? My father turned to me. "Nora," he said, and his voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. I was wrong. I let the words settle. I did not rush to fill the silence for him. He said he should have trusted me. He said he should have called. He said there was no excuse. My mother whispered that she was sorry too, though it came out broken, as if apology were a language she had waited too long to learn. I nodded once. "I didn't come here for an apology," I said. "I came so the truth would be said in the same kind of room where the lie was born." No one argued. Paul Henley cleared his throat, and in the most ordinary voice imaginable, said the record should note that the prior accusation against me had no basis in fact. Then he wrote it down. That small movement of his pen healed something I had been carrying in my chest for years. Paperwork can be cruel. Paperwork can also be merciful. When the meeting ended, my father asked if we could talk outside. We stood beneath the overhang near the parking lot while a cold wind moved wrappers along the curb. He told me my grandfather had regretted the distance. He said he had regretted it too, though he had not known how to bridge what he had broken. I believed that last part. Men like him often confuse pride with structure, and then act surprised when they end up living inside a ruin. "I can't give you back those years," he said. "I know," I answered. He looked as if he wanted me to say something softer, something that would let him place the whole thing in the past and carry it home as a lesson instead of a loss. But dignity is not the same thing as reunion. I had spent too many nights in too many small rooms earning the difference. "I hope you tell the truth when people ask why I left," I said. He nodded. For once, there was nothing polished in him. Only age, only consequence. I took the portrait because my grandfather had wanted me to have it, not the framed version that had hung in the hallway. I asked Paul to send me the original contact sheet too. Every frame, even the flawed ones. Especially the flawed ones. Those were the honest parts. Then I walked to my car alone. I never needed their approval to become who I was meant to be. The morning had turned bright, but the wind was still sharp enough to make my eyes water. Across the lot, the courthouse flag moved against a clean blue sky, and for a moment, everything was still except the leaves skittering near the curb. I rested my hand on the roof of my car, looked out over the empty parking spaces, and let the silence stay gentle.